The church had long been a beacon of hope in the small riverside town, where generations found solace in its stone embrace. Father Joshua, beloved for his kind heart and unwavering faith, was known to welcome anyone who came seeking comfort. The priest would often say, "This is God's house, a place for all souls." Yet, as the rain began as a light patter and morphed into an unyielding storm, the church's hallowed halls were tested like never before. The river, once a gentle lifeblood to the community, now roared with a terrible force, swelling beyond its banks, turning streets into torrents and homes into islands of despair. Father Joshua refused to abandon his post. He moved with purpose through the nave, his robes soaked as he lifted sacred objects to higher ground. Each prayer whispered was a plea for safety, not for himself but for the town he cherished. Water crept in under the heavy wooden doors, cold and relentless, pooling at his feet, rising fast. The stained glass windows shuddered as gusts of wind lashed at them, bending their stories of saints and martyrs in grotesque, fluid distortions. The church groaned, a sound that seemed almost alive, as if it too feared what was to come. Amidst the roar of rain and the cracking of branches outside, a sudden sound cut through, a sharp, desperate bark. Father Joshua turned, startled. Framed by the flickering candlelight and the dim glow of storm-filtered moonlight stood a stray dog, drenched to the bone. The dog's eyes, deep and brown, glistened with a mixture of fear and urgency. The animal was a familiar presence around the town, a nomad that never lingered too long in any one place. Yet tonight, it had braved the ferocity of the storm to be here, at this very door. For a moment, disbelief washed over Father Joshua. Why had the creature come? The dog barked again, more insistent this time, stepping forward, paws sliding on the slick floor. The priest's pulse quickened as he realized this wasn't a chance visit. It felt like a sign, an odd, divine message wrapped in fur and shivers. The water had climbed to his knees now, its icy grip biting through his robe. Time was running out. The dog circled him, then trotted toward a side corridor, stopping to look back with eyes that seemed to plead, "Follow me." Father Joshua hesitated, the weight of uncertainty pressing down like the floodwaters at his legs. Yet, the conviction in the animal's gaze urged him onward. He swallowed his fear, muttered a final prayer, and moved after the dog, splashes marking each hurried step. They entered the narrow passage that led to the crypt below, a place of silence and reflection now filled with foreboding shadows. The cold stone walls closed around them, and the priest shivered, not just from the chill but from the palpable tension. The dog led the way, its tail low, ears back, glancing over its shoulder every few moments. Father Joshua followed, guided by that unwavering signal of hope, as the sound of water surging against the church walls echoed above, a grim reminder of their dwindling time. The barking resumed, echoing sharply in the confined space, urging Father Joshua to quicken his pace. The crypt loomed ahead, dark and unwelcoming, yet now it was their only refuge. With one final leap, the dog reached the entrance and turned to watch as Father Joshua stumbled forward, his breath ragged, hope flickering as faintly as the candle that still burned in the distance. Father Joshua stumbled into the crypt, the sound of the dog's urgent barking filling the cold, echoing chamber. The door creaked as he pushed it shut, the relentless thundering of water muted but ever present beyond the stone. He leaned against the damp wall, trying to catch his breath, heart racing as adrenaline surged through him. The air was thick with the scent of old stone and damp earth, mingling with a metallic tang of fear. The dog stood before him, eyes locked on his, tail wagging as if to say, "We are safe for now." But were they? The crypt, a place meant for solemn remembrance, now felt like both a sanctuary and a tomb. Father Joshua scanned the shadowed room, its rows of ancient tombs and carved angels casting long, unsettling silhouettes. Each drop of water that dripped from the ceiling felt like a drumbeat counting down the seconds they had left. He shivered, the chill seeping into his bones, mixing with the dread that threatened to paralyze him. The dog, not content with their current safety, began to pace. Its ears twitched, attuned to sounds that the priest could barely discern, a groan of shifting stone, the distant crash of something massive succumbing to the flood's power. Father Joshua watched as the animal approached a dark corner of the crypt, sniffing and scratching at the ground with renewed fervor. It let out a low whine, then barked, sharp and commanding, before turning to him with eyes that seemed to convey a single word: help. Confusion clouded the priest's mind. What was it trying to show him? He took a hesitant step forward, the water now soaking the hem of his robe, cold as the river itself. His fingers traced the damp, crumbling wall as he moved toward the dog. Beneath its paws was a loose stone, partially dislodged from the crypt floor. With a grunt of effort, Father Joshua pried it free, revealing a dark, narrow hole beneath. A draft of air, shockingly fresh and cool, rushed up to meet him. The dog barked excitedly, its tail wagging as it danced around the opening. Hope flared in his chest, sudden and fierce. This was not just a crypt, it held an escape route, long forgotten and hidden beneath centuries of dust and stone. Perhaps it had once served as an ancient passage, a secret used by priests in times of peril. But now, in this moment of desperation, it was salvation. Father Joshua looked at the dog, eyes stinging with gratitude and wonder. This creature, astray with no ties, had found him and led him here, defying reason and fear alike. He whispered a shaky, "Thank you," as he knelt and widened the gap, fingers working frantically despite their numbness. The water splashed higher as if angered by his discovery, lapping now at his waist. Time was slipping through his grasp, carried away by the current that threatened to engulf them both. The dog darted through the opening, its body disappearing into the darkness. Heart pounding, Father Joshua hoisted himself after it, every muscle straining as he pushed his way into the cramped tunnel. The scent of earth and wet stone closed in around him, and he forced himself not to think of the tons of rock above, the crushing weight of water seeking to claim its dominion. The barking up ahead pulled him from that abyss of fear, guiding him with unwavering faith through the suffocating dark. As they moved, the roar of the flood began to fade, replaced by the steady rhythm of their breathing and the scrabbling of paws on the damp ground. Father Joshua crawled, hands scraping over sharp stones, his heart buoyed by the presence of his unlikely companion. Every time he faltered, the dog was there, waiting, eyes glowing with determination. As Father Joshua moved through the narrow tunnel, his body ached with exhaustion, but the dog's unwavering presence spurred him onward. The darkness pressed in on all sides, each scrape of his hand and shift of his knees reverberating like echoes of his heartbeat. The sound of rushing water from above was now a distant roar, replaced by the quiet, damp rustle of their passage. Every so often, the dog would glance back, its eyes catching the dim light that filtered from cracks in the stone, its silent reassurance propelling Joshua forward. Suddenly, the tunnel widened into a chamber, small and ancient, its walls marked with carvings and forgotten symbols. Father Joshua paused, gasping for breath, his eyes scanning the space that seemed carved from the very bones of the earth. The dog stood at the center, its tail low but wagging slightly, as if it too sensed the brief reprieve this hidden room offered. The priest touched one of the carvings, fingers brushing over the worn stone, a strange sense of familiarity settling over him. He whispered a prayer of thanks, the words trembling with the weight of the moment. But relief was fleeting. A sudden crack and a tremor beneath their feet sent a jolt of panic through his chest. The flood was relentless, seeping into even the deepest places, finding them despite their refuge. The water trickled down the walls now, thin rivulets that would soon grow. The dog barked, breaking Joshua's trance, and darted to a far corner where another opening led deeper into the earth. It barked again, insistent and commanding, eyes locked with his in a silent plea to keep moving. Father Joshua swallowed hard, exhaustion clawing at him, doubt gnawing at the edges of his resolve. But the dog's faith in him, or perhaps its instinct, was unwavering. He nodded, more to himself than to the animal, and pressed on, following it through the new passage. This tunnel was even narrower, the air colder and tinged with a metallic scent of stone. His breath came in short gasps, each one visible in the thin, freezing air. The sound of water trickling grew louder, a cruel reminder of their fleeting safety. Minutes turned into a blur of crawling and scrambling, his knees raw and palms bleeding from the jagged floor. Just when despair threatened to take hold, the tunnel began to slope upward, the ceiling lifting slightly. The dog barked again, but this time it was a sound of triumph, tail wagging furiously as it pushed forward. A sliver of light appeared ahead, weak but unmistakable. Father Joshua's heart surged with renewed hope. They were close, so close to salvation. The tunnel opened to a ledge overlooking a steep hill, beyond which lay the expanse of the darkened town. The rain continued to pour, but the ground here was elevated, safe from the roaring river that had swallowed the streets below. Father Joshua stumbled out, the dog bounding ahead and turning to face him with eyes bright and full of life. They had made it. A laugh bubbled up in his chest, half mad with relief, and he sank to his knees, hands digging into the wet grass as the reality of their escape washed over him. But the moment shattered as a sound reached his ears, a faint, distant cry. He turned, eyes scanning the chaos below. Shadows moved against the rising water, figures stranded on rooftops, waving, calling for help. Father Joshua's smile faltered, replaced by the weight of realization. Their journey was not over. They had found safety, but so many others were still in peril. Before he could rise, the dog was already moving, tail whipping as it dashed back toward the town. Father Joshua stared, stunned by the animal's unyielding courage. It paused only for a second, barking as if to say, "Come, there is more to do." His breath caught in his chest, a new surge of purpose filling him. This creature, who owed nothing to anyone, had saved him and now urged him to save others. Father Joshua pushed himself to his feet, legs trembling but strong with renewed determination. He would not waste the gift he had been given, the lesson of a stray dog's loyalty and instinct. They would go back. They would save as many as they could. Father Joshua stood on the rain-soaked ledge, the chill biting through his drenched robe, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. Below, the town was a chaotic landscape of rushing water and dark silhouettes clinging to rooftops and debris. The stray dog, already bounding down the slope, paused only to glance back, barking in urgent encouragement. Joshua took a deep breath, feeling the rush of cold air fill his lungs, and followed, feet slipping on the slick grass as he descended toward the heart of the storm. The roar of the river grew louder, punctuated by cries for help and the sound of collapsing structures. The dog reached the edge of a narrow path that cut through to the main street, now a violent current of muddy water and debris. Without hesitation, it leaped into the shallower edges, paddling fiercely, its eyes fixed on a small figure stranded on a low roof, a child, no more than 6 or 7, shivering and clutching a soaked blanket. The dog barked, a sound filled with urgency and direction, as if to signal its intent. The current battered him, pulling at his robes and threatening to drag him under. But the sight of the dog, now barking at the base of the roof to keep the child's attention, spurred him on. He reached the small structure and grasped its edge, pulling himself up with a grunt of effort. The child reached out instinctively, eyes glistening with tears, and Joshua wrapped his arms around them, holding tightly. The dog barked once more, circling and wagging its tail, before shifting its gaze to the path back to higher ground. Father Joshua reached the edge, knees buckling from exhaustion, but his resolve was iron. He scanned the area, noting the precarious perch of the child and the rushing waters that threatened to sweep everything away. The dog was already halfway across, fighting the current with a determination that bordered on miraculous. With a final prayer whispered under his breath, Joshua plunged into the frigid water, every muscle tensing as the cold wrapped around him like chains. He pushed forward, one arm at a time, eyes never leaving the child who now stared, wide-eyed and hopeful. The current battered him, pulling at his robes and threatening to drag him under. But the sight of the dog, now barking at the base of the roof to keep the child's attention, spurred him on. He reached the small structure and grasped its edge, pulling himself up with a grunt of effort. The child reached out instinctively, eyes glistening with tears, and Joshua wrapped his arms around them, holding tightly. The dog barked once more, circling and wagging its tail, before shifting its gaze to the path back to higher ground. "Hold on to me," Father Joshua whispered, his voice steady despite the chaos. The child clung to him, tiny fingers digging into his wet robes. With careful steps, he eased them both into the water, the current immediately testing his balance. The dog swam ahead, leading the way, its head bobbing up and down as it kept a vigilant watch on them. Step by step, Joshua followed, muscles screaming under the strain but driven by the sheer will to survive, and the dog's unfathomable bravery. Finally, the three of them stumbled onto the muddy bank, collapsing in a heap of exhaustion and relief. The child coughed and shivered, but their eyes sparkled with life. Father Joshua placed a gentle hand on their back, murmuring reassurances as he glanced at the dog, whose chest heaved with exertion but whose tail thumped weakly in triumph. The priest's heart swelled with gratitude, tears mingling with the rain as he whispered, "You are an angel, sent to guide us." But their work was not done. Shouts echoed from further down the street, where other townsfolk struggled against the relentless tide. The dog's ears pricked up, and it stood on unsteady legs, eyes scanning the scene with renewed purpose. Father Joshua nodded, understanding without words. They were bound now, man and dog, by a shared mission. The dog bolted toward the next call for help, its body a blur of movement against the storm's fury, and Joshua followed, the child safe in the arms of nearby townspeople who reached out to take them. Hour after hour, the night stretched on, a blur of rescues and near misses. Each time Father Joshua felt his strength waning, he would see the dog, tireless, fearless, darting through the chaos, barking directions, guiding them to safety. The townspeople, once paralyzed by fear, found hope in the sight of the small animal that seemed to know no limit to its courage. Whispers of admiration spread among them, and soon they worked as one, a chain of arms and voices pulling each other back from the edge of despair. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the rain finally relented, slowing to a steady patter. The floodwaters, though still treacherous, began to recede. Exhausted but unyielding, Father Joshua and the dog stood side by side, mud-splattered and spent. The church's steeple, though battered, stood tall in the distance, a testament to endurance. The dog looked up at him, eyes filled with a knowing gentleness that broke his heart with its depth. Father Joshua knelt and wrapped his arms around it, feeling the warmth of its body, a lifeline in a night of terror. They had saved lives together, found hope in each other's courage. The town, though scarred, would rebuild, bound by the memory of a night when a stray dog led them back to hope. As the first rays of dawn pushed away the storm's shadow, Father Joshua stood on the hill, the cold wind tugging at his torn robes. The town below, battered and drenched, began to reveal the faces of those who had survived. People emerged from rooftops, shivering yet alive, their eyes reflecting both exhaustion and a glimmer of relief. The floodwaters, now subdued, swirled lazily through the streets, carrying the remnants of the night's chaos. Broken wood, scattered belongings, fragments of life that would be pieced back together in time. Father Joshua glanced down at the dog beside him. Its fur, once matted and soaked, was now crusted with mud, but its eyes were as bright as ever, glistening with an indescribable mixture of triumph and fatigue. The dog's chest rose and fell rapidly, its body trembling from the effort of the long, harrowing night. Joshua felt a wave of gratitude wash over him, deeper than any prayer he'd ever uttered. He knelt, placing a hand on the dog's head, the simple touch speaking volumes of thanks and admiration. "Without you, we would have been lost," he whispered, voice breaking with emotion. The dog leaned into his touch, eyes closing briefly as if to acknowledge the bond they now shared, a silent testament to the power of trust and instinct, forged in the crucible of survival. A murmur rose from the townspeople who now gathered, pointing up to the hill where man and dog stood as sentinels. A few brave souls waded through the ankle-deep water toward them, their expressions shifting from disbelief to awe as they reached the pair. One elderly woman, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks, extended a trembling hand to touch the dog's mud-streaked fur. "You saved my grandson," she said, her voice choked with gratitude. "God bless you both." The crowd's voices grew louder, their stories weaving together. How they had seen the dog, barking, guiding, urging them toward higher ground. How Father Joshua had followed, carrying children and helping the frail. The tale of the priest and the stray that had saved them spread like wildfire, binding them together in a collective memory that would be told for years. Amid the growing crowd, the dog stood stoically, as if it understood its role in the miracle of that night. Father Joshua felt the eyes of the people on him, and for once, he did not need to search for words. "Last night," he began, his voice strong but tender, "we were given a gift, not just of survival, but of faith. Faith in each other, in the unexpected, in the smallest miracles that appear when hope is lost." He looked down at the dog, whose tail wagged faintly, "and in those who walk among us, unnoticed, until the moment we need them most." The people nodded, some wiping tears from their eyes, others looking at the dog with reverence as if seeing it anew. A young boy pushed forward, holding a piece of bread he had saved from his flooded home. He offered it to the dog, whose eyes widened in surprise before it took the morsel gently, a symbol of trust and unity. Laughter bubbled up through the crowd, a sound foreign after the night's terror, but welcome and healing. It was the first step toward normalcy, a sign that they would recover, rebuild, and remember. As the sun rose higher, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, the dog padded over to Father Joshua and nuzzled his hand. It was time for rest, for both of them. The priest led the way back up the hill, the dog at his side, both silent but sharing a profound understanding. The dog curled up at the base of the altar, eyes closing as it drifted into a deep, well-deserved sleep. The town would repair the church, patch the roof, clean away the mud and debris. But Father Joshua knew that no matter how many seasons passed or how many repairs were made, this night would remain etched into the stone walls and the hearts of the people who had lived through it. The town was forever changed, no longer just a community defined by its river and fields, but a place bound by a shared tale of courage. And at the center of that tale would always be the story of a priest who followed a stray dog into the storm, and the bond they forged that saved them all. With the town slowly stirring to life, Father Joshua sat beside the dog, leaning against the altar as sunlight streamed through the cracked stained-glass windows. It painted the room in shards of color, a beautiful reminder that even broken things could become something new. And as the light warmed his face, the priest knew that faith had found them in the simplest of forms, a loyal, courageous dog, sent not just to save them, but to remind them that hope comes in all shapes, even the unlikeliest ones. It's an honor to be able to create content for you. If you want to support the channel even more, you can follow the instructions that I will leave on the pinned comment. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Love you all.